Hey guys, it's Marissa, and today I will be reading a couple pages of the Hunger Games Mockingjay. I stare down at my shoes, watching as a fine layer of ash settles on the warm, worn leather. This is where the bed I shared with my sister, Prim, stood. Over there was the kitchen table. The bricks of the chimney, which collapsed in a charred heap, provided a point of reference for the rest of the house. How else could I orient myself in this sea of gray? Almost nothing remains of District 12. A month ago, the capital's firebombs obliterated the poor coal miners' houses in the seam, the shops in the town, even the Justice Building. The only area that escaped incineration was the victors' village. I don't know why exactly. Perhaps so anyone forced to come here on capital business would have somewhere decent to stay. The odd reporter, a committee assessing the condition of the coal mines, a squad of peacekeepers checking for returning refugees. But no one is returning except me, and that's only for a brief visit. The authorities in District 13 were against my coming back. They viewed it as costly and they viewed it as a costly and pointless venture, given that at least a dozen invisible hovercrafts are circling overhead for my protection, and there's no intelligence to be gained. I had to see it, though. So much so that I made it a condition in my cooperating with any of their plans. Finally, Plutarch Havensby, the head game maker who had organized the rebels in the capital, threw up his hands. Let her go. Better to waste a day than another month. Maybe a little tour of 12 is just what she needs to convince her we're on the same side. The same side. A pain stabbed my left temple, and I pressed my hand against it, right on the spot where Joanna Mason hit me with the coil of wire. The memories swirl as I try to sort out what is true and what is false. What series of events led me to be standing in the ruins of my city? This is hard because the effects of the concussion she gave me haven't completely subsided, and my thoughts still have a tendency to jumble together. Also, the drugs they use to control my pain and mood sometimes make me see things. I guess. I'm still not entirely convinced that I was hallucinating. The night the floor of my hospital room transformed into a carpet of writhing snakes. I use a technique one of the doctors suggested. I start with the simplest things I know to be true, and work toward the more complicated. The list begins to roll into my head. My name is Katniss Everdeen. I am 17 years old. My home is District 12. I was in the Hunger Games. I escaped. The capital hates me. Peeta was taken prisoner. He is thought to be dead. Most likely he is dead. It is probably best if he is dead. Katniss, should I come down? My best friend Gale's voice reaches me through the headset the rebels insist that I wear. He's up in a hovercraft, watching me carefully, waiting to swoop in if anything goes amiss. I realize I'm crouched down now, elbows on my thighs, my head braced between my hands. I must look on the verge of some kind of breakdown. This won't do. Not when they're finally weaning me off the medication. I straighten up and wave his offer away. No, I'm fine. To reinforce this, I begin to move away from my old house and in toward the town. Gale asked to be dropped off in 12 with me, but he didn't force the issue when I refused his company. He understands that I don't want anyone with me today, not even him. Some walks you just have to take alone. The summer's been scorching hot and dry as a bone. There's been next to no rain to disturb the piles of ash left by the attack. They shift here and there in reaction to my footsteps. No breeze to scatter them. I keep my eyes on what I remember as the road, because when I first landed in the meadow, I wasn't careful and walked right into a rock. Only it wasn't a rock. It was someone's skull. It rolled over and over and landed face up, and for a long time I couldn't stop looking at the teeth, wondering whose they were, thinking of how mine would probably look the same way under similar circumstances. I stick to the road out of habit, but it's a bad choice, because it's full of the remains of those who tried to flee. Some were incinerated entirely, but others, probably overcome with the smoke, escaped the worst of the flames, and now lie reeking in various states of decomposition, carrion for scavengers, blanketed by flies. I killed you, I think, as I pass a pile, and you, because I did. It was my arrow, aimed at the chink in the force field surrounding the arena, that brought on this firestorm of retribution, that sent the whole country of Panam into chaos. In my head I hear President Snow's words, spoken the morning I was to begin the victory tour. Katniss Everdeen, the girl who was on fire, you have provided a spark that, left unattended, may grow into an inferno that destroys Panam. It turns out he wasn't exaggerating or simply trying to scare me. He was, perhaps, genuinely attempting to enlist my help, but I had already set something in motion that I had no ability to control. Burning. Still burning, I think numbly. The fires of the coal mine belch black smoke in the distance. There's no one left to care, though. More than 90% of the district's population is dead. The remaining 800 or so are refugees in District 13, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the same thing as being homeless forever. I know I shouldn't think that. I know I should be grateful for the way we have been welcomed. Sick, wounded, starving, and empty-handed. Still, I can never get around to the fact that District 13 was instrumental in District 12's destruction. This doesn't absolve me of blame. There's plenty of blame to go around. But without them, I would not have been part of a larger plot to overthrow the capital, or had been wherewithal to do with it. The citizens of District 12 had no organized resistance movement of their own, no say in any of this. They only had the misfortune to have me. Some survivors think it's good luck, though, to be free of District 12 at last, to have escaped the endless hunger and oppression, the perilous mines, the lash of our final head peacekeeper, Romulus Thread. To have a new home at all is seen as a wonder, since, up until a short time ago, we hadn't even known that District 13 still existed. The credit for the survivors' escape had landed squarely on Gale's shoulders, although he's loath to accept it. As soon as the quarter quell was over, as soon as I had been lifted from the arena, the electricity in District 12 was cut, the televisions went black, and the scene became so silent people could hear one another's heartbeats. No one did anything to protest or celebrate what had happened in the arena. Yet, within 15 minutes, the sky was filled with hoverplanes, and the bombs were raining down. It was Gale who thought of the meadow, one of the few places not filled with old woman homes and bedded with coal dust. He herded those he could in its direction, including my mother and Prim. He formed the team that pulled down the fence, now just a harmless chain-link barrier with the electricity off, and led the people to the woods. He took them to the only place he could think of, the lake my father had shown me as a child, and it was from there they watched the distant flames eat up everything they knew in the world. By dawn, the bombers were gone, the fires dying, the final stragglers rounded up. My mother and Prim had set up a medical area for the injured and were attempting to treat them with whatever they could glean from the woods. Gale had 2 sets of bows and arrows, 1 hunting knife, 1 fishing net, and over 800 terrified people to feed. With the help of those who were able-bodied, they managed for 3 days, and that's when the hovercraft unexpectedly arrived to evacuate them to District 13, where there were more than enough clean, white living compartments, plenty of clothing, and 3 meals a day. The compartments had the disadvantage of being underground. The clothing was identical, and the food was relatively tasteless. But for the refugees of 12, those were minor considerations. They were safe. They were being cared for. They were alive and eagerly welcomed.